design. So this is anything to do with books, publications, magazines, anything that's sort of a multiple page document, children's books, newspaper articles, anything like that. And really what it means is the layout of the page and the layout of the text on that page, with imagery and how you put those things together and how you get it organised in a way that is engaging for the viewer. So you can see I've got one here, and we're going to sort of replicate this, and I'm going to go through the steps of how I got to this point. So first thing I did was got a Illustrator document. Now if you're doing a double page spread, it's nice and easy just to do an A3 page, and then you can break it in half. So we're just going to do A3. Obviously it would be for print, and then create. Now, if you were looking at publication or editorial design in more depth, you'd use Adobe InDesign, which lets you do separate pages. But for this purpose, we're just looking at a double page spread. We're just designing sort of one solid thing. So we're just going to do it in Illustrator. And a lot of the features from InDesign are actually available in Illustrator as well. So we've got our document here. Now, if I show you my previous one, you can see if I bring these in, you can see I've got these guides here, so these blue lines. Now these are sort of like your margins and your troughs or your channels. So thinking about the page itself, if it was set up as a magazine, how would that look? Where would the edges of the pages be? Where would the gap be in the middle where the book is bound? So all of those things to consider. And obviously you always want a really good margin when you're working on a magazine or a newspaper or anything like that. So we're going to go to View, Rulers and Show Rulers, and then you'll see we get these rulers up either side. And then we're just going to drag these in. Now you can use the sort of markers on the left hand side. So I'm going to sort of go 1, 2, 3 down. Now it is a bit of a guessing game on Illustrator, but we're not looking for perfection right now. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm sort of going to go 1, 2, 3 up to try and get that similar sort of top and bottom margins. I'm going to do the same here and the same on the edge. Now, for my sort of channel, or my trough, or whatever you want to call it, so the middle of my page, I want to actually just drop in something right in the middle of my page. So I'm looking for sort of the very middle. And again, it doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. And then I'm just going to do another one either side. So I'm going to give it a bit of gap. So I'm going to sort of like span that out. So I've got one either side. Now that's quite important because actually the trough or the channel down the middle is where the book is bound. So a lot of the stuff, if you put it anywhere near that, would disappear down the inside of the book anyway. So you wouldn't be able to read it. So having that lined out is really useful. Then you can see we've got all of these on one layer. So I'm actually just going to lock that layer and I'm going to make a new layer. So we're going to call that our guides layer. And we're just going to leave it like that. Now, obviously you need an article to work with, so my advice would be to find an article that is interesting or links to something you're interested in or links to your project in some way, and just use the text from that. Obviously as a graphic designer, you're not going to be writing your own articles, you'll always be supplied with the text, so it doesn't matter if you just want to Google an article. You should also have some imagery as well, so you can see on my example, I've got a digital illustration that I've done. I've used a Wacom tablet for that. It could be a digital illustration that you've just done in Illustrator using Shape Builder or the pen tool. It could be your own photographs. It could be some hand-drawn illustrations or some collaged elements, whatever it is that you want it to be, but there should always be some imagery of some sort on the page. You don't really want a layout that is entirely text unless you're very confident with typography and you're thinking about type as image and how you use text in a visual way, then really you should have some imagery as well. So I'm just going to get an article. Okay, so I've got one that I'm going to use. Now I'm going to copy the headline. So Command C, and then I'm going to go back to my document, and before you paste it in, you want to draw yourself a text box. This is really important. So draw yourself your text box for your headline, paste it in. What I'm going to do is, if you haven't got this panel open on the left hand side, so this one is your character panel, you can just go to Window, and typography and character, and it'll open that panel for you. So I'm just going to make it bigger like that. And then when I go back to my article, you can see you've got a subheading here. So depending on what article you've got, it might have a subheading, it might not. Obviously you can see they also include the author, but I'm not going to worry about that for now. I just want the heading and the subheading. So same thing again, draw yourself a text box before you paste the text in. Now because this is a subheading, I want this smaller. I'm going to look at this in a little bit more depth later, but I want my hierarchy in there. So I want to be thinking about what's the most important piece of information and then working my way down from that. And then what I'm going to do is get the majority of the article. Now, depending on how your article is written, you might need to copy and paste this in small batches. So you can see mine's in sort of several paragraphs and it's got images in the middle. So I would need to go through and copy and paste each one in. Now I'm putting them into the same text box and that will make sense in a minute. So if I paste that in, and then I'm going to go back and get some more. And then the last bit. Now if I expand this out, you can sort of see what's happening here. I'm going to make the text a bit smaller. And then the final bit of my article. There we go. Now, in order to get this into columns, so if you think of any sort of magazine or publication, they don't tend to work in one big paragraph of text. They either have 2 or 3 columns on a page, some even have 4. Obviously my text is 10 points here, that's probably the biggest you want to go. Really 8 or 9 is more typical for magazines. So I've got this text box, and you can see I've got this icon down here, which is a little sort of plus symbol. And when I go up here and click, it should recreate another text box with the rest of that text in. There you go. So you can see it gives me an equal sized column. So I've just clicked rather than drawn, and it gives me 2 columns, equal size, equal width. And you can see they're linked with this big red line in the middle. And what that means is that the text from there will carry on in there, so they're connected. Now, because I've got quite a long article, I've still got some more here, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And then that is my article done and dusted. Now, that doesn't really fill my page, so I'm going to break the rules a bit here and just actually select all my text boxes and take the size up. So like I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. I'd recommend a smaller point size, but obviously it depends on how long your article is. Now, at the moment, this doesn't look super exciting. It looks a bit boring. You need to really think about font here. So you're going to have one font for your headline and your subheading, and then a different font for your main text. So I would advise using this website, so fontpair.co. Now this looks at Google Fonts specifically, and you can see it gives you font combinations, and you can see here different font combinations. The headline is typed in one font and the body text is typed in a different font. So you can go through these and have a look and figure out if there's a version or a combination that you like the look of. Now I quite like this one. Quite like that one as well. But I think I might go for that one. So that's Montezera and Source Sans Pro. So now what you need to do is find those fonts. So if I go to googlefonts.com, I can go in here and I can go Source Sans, and there it is, Source Sans Pro. So I can open that, and then you can see download font family. Now what that does, it gives me all of these. So extra light, light, light italic, regular, blah, blah, blah. So you can see there's loads of different versions of this one font. So if I wanted to put any quotes in bold or light or italic, then we've got all those options. So I'm going to download the font family. I'm going to do the same for the other one. So I'm going to go back and type in that one and do the same again. Now if I look here, Montezera was the header. So I'm going to do the same for mine. So I'm going to use my Montezera font for the header. Now I'm going to go to my downloads and find those fonts that I've just downloaded, and you should see them in their own little folders. and then it gives you these TTF, or sometimes they're called OTF files. So I'm just going to select all of those, double click them, and then you should get an option for install font. When I go to Montezera, you'll see I've got all the different fonts. So I've just selected them all in one go and open them, and then it's let me install them. So I'm going to do the same one for my other fonts. So this is a nice and easy way of getting your own fonts, making your work feel a little bit more personal, a little bit purposeful as well, because you're really thinking about your font choices rather than just using what's in Photoshop or Illustrator already. There are other free fonts websites, but sometimes they can have quite a lot of sort of cringy, over-the-top fonts. So things like Google Fonts are really nice, and this Font Pair website only shows you Google Fonts, so it gives you some really sort of simplistic, nice options here. So I've got my two fonts that I want, so I'm going to go back to my design, and hopefully if I select here, I can go to there we go, so Montezera, and I'm going to choose extra bold, and I'm just going to take the size down a little bit. So that's my extra bold. I'm going to do that one in the same font, but not extra bold this time. So I'm just going to go medium, and again I'm going to take the size down and place that underneath. I might actually go for the italic version, so I might go medium italic, like that. And then for my main text, I'm going to go for my other font, which was Source Sans. So again, you just need to scroll through and find it. So there is Source Sans Pro, and I'm probably just going to go with light. I think I like the light version. Now, you might notice it, you might not notice this. It depends on whether you've got a good eye for detail. Is that if I zoom in here, you can see where the word is too long for the line, it's hyphenated it. So things like individual, analysis, you can see it happening in lots of different places. Now, that is a bit of a designer's worst nightmare. So you don't want your text hyphenated. It makes it really hard to read. Another reason we've gone for columns is that people don't read very long lines of text. So if your line of text is more than 8 or maybe 12 words long, people naturally will stop reading it and stop taking the information in. So this is why we use columns in large articles or large amounts of text. So you've only got a certain amount of numbers, certain number of words per line, and it makes it easier to read. So having your text hyphenated is another thing that you don't want. So if you go to your paragraph window or panel, and again you can open that up here if you've not got that. So paragraph, and you can see there's a little thing at the bottom that says hyphenate, so untick that. So whenever you're doing large amounts of text, you don't want it hyphenated, and you don't want it more than sort of 8 to 12 words per line, really. Now we've got our text boxes here. We've got some hierarchy, so we've got our subheading and our main heading, and we've got a bit of contrast between those two. It's okay, it's not perfect, it's not really grabbing my attention. What I need to do now is bring my image in. Now you can see I've got an illustration here, so I'm just going to copy and paste that in. Now I'm going to put it down here, depending on what your illustration is or what your image is, depends on how you want to lay it out. You might want it to go in the middle of the page, you might want to wrap the text around it, and you can find YouTube videos on how to wrap text in Illustrator. You know, I could have had a different design that was sort of like a small banner along the top or along the bottom. I could have done a smaller image that would go like in the paragraph and had multiple of them. So it's totally up to you how you use imagery and how you lay it out, but this is what I've got. Now you can see if I place it there, it covers up this part of the text, which is not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten that text box, and I'm actually going to bring this one down here to join on the bottom, shorten that, make that skinnier so that it will sort of fit, and then I'm going to make another text box to sort of fill out the rest of the text that's missing. I'm going to make that same size as my other one. So you can see I can now shorten that a bit more. Now if I select all of these, I can make my text a little bit bigger, because I've definitely got room to make my text bigger because I'm not filling the page now. but you can see what happens when I make it one size bigger. It sends the whole article to pot. So you might play around with your distance between the lines, so this spreads it out. If you go to your paragraph panel, you might play around with how much space is at the end of the paragraph, so that's these ones. You might play around with indentation, totally up to you. You can do things like, if I go to character up here and open the whole panel, you can see I could go in here and make that A bigger. So you can see it gives me a larger A, so that's sort of traditional book style font. Loads of different things. So have a look, have a play around, and just sort of get used to using that. What I want to do really is actually make certain parts of the text stand out. So this is something that a lot of magazines and newspapers do to make big blocks of text more interesting. So you can see I've got two pieces here where the text is bigger and it's in a different colour. Now these are called pull-out quotes. So it might just be an interesting quote, or it might be a piece of speech, or something someone has said, so it's in quotation marks. What you do is you pull those out of the main text and you make them stand out. So it might just be that they're bigger, it might be that they're bolder, it might be that you put a coloured box behind them, you could make them in italics, you could change the colour of the font, whatever you want to do, but it should be consistent, so it should be the same thing. So if you do more than one of those quotes, you should use the same technique for both rather than overcomplicating your design. So all I'm going to do is make mine bigger. I might go italic, and then I'm actually going to eyedrop the colour from my illustration and put them into a different colour. I think I can afford to go a bit bigger there. So what you want to do is you want to look through your text. Now you can see I've got a line that's on its own, so I don't really want that. So what I need to do is I need to look at the length of my paragraphs. So I might just shorten my paragraphs a little. Obviously I could look at the distance between, so you don't really want any pieces of text that are sort of on their own, in their own space, sort of looking like they don't belong there, because that's really not what we want. Now I think I'm going to take that quote there and make that bigger as well. So again, we're going to go italic, we've made it a bit bigger, and we've gone for the colour of the illustration. So you can see those two tied together. Now again, I've got a piece of text on its own, so I don't want that. I might actually leave that there and just make this a bit skinnier. And then it brings this down. So it's all trial and error, it's all about playing around. I might make this much bigger for sort of dramatic effect. And again, think about how spaced it out it is. So you can see that fills the space a lot more nicely, and it makes this look like it isn't sort of sat on its own. And then obviously my page is still looking a bit boring. You could change colours of things, you could add a border. I'm just going to add a coloured background and just stick a colour behind the main text, leave a bit of a white border. You could change the entire colour of the page if you wanted to. It's totally up to you, but I'm just going to go with this sort of border here. Like so. Now this is really a chance just to show off your style, your skills, the kind of thing you like to go for. How out there do you want your design to be, or do you want it to play quite safe? Look at examples, look at how other designers lay out their pages for inspiration. Look at magazines, pick up magazines that you see out and about, have a read, see how they design their stuff and see how it looks. And I'm also going to do sort of a little banner style box that comes out from the side for my sort of headline area, and I'm just going to make that stand out. And I'm going to make that another colour from here. There you go. So you can see that's a little bit more exciting than it was before. We've thought about our paragraphs, we've thought about our fonts, we've thought about our background, we've got quotes that stand out from the rest of the text, and we've thought about making sure our paragraphs are the right size. We've got our linked text boxes here, by just copying it all into one text box and then using that little plus symbol at the bottom. So give it a go and see how you get on. But that is the sort of the basic way to do editorial page layouts in Illustrator.